Most parents think they're teaching their children the difference between needs and wants. But what they're actually teaching, without realizing it, is guilt, confusion, and emotional spending. And the scary part is, you don't see the damage immediately. You only see it years later when your child grows up, earns money, and still struggles to control their spending. One of the greatest mistakes parents make, and I'm one myself, is turning wants versus needs into a good versus bad conversation. Needs unfortunately become good, wants become bad. And once a child learns that wanting something is bad, two things happen. Either they feel guilty for wanting things, or they learn to hide their wants and spend emotionally later on, and it comes back with a vengeance. Wants are not inherently wrong. Needs are also not morally superior. What actually matters is priority. And that is something most parents were never taught. And therefore, they struggle to teach their own children. I see this mistake all the time, even in very normal, everyday circumstances. For example, when I'm out eating with my family, I'll often notice parents, and many a times they would place a phone or a tablet in front of their child and they treat it like it's necessary. What is it necessary for? I'm not sure. I don't do it myself, but it might be necessary to get them calm, to eat their food, or maybe even just to not create a ruckus around. It is not because the child needs it to survive, but sometimes the parent might be tired. Like I said earlier, they don't want to be embarrassed with their child moving around or creating a ruckus or, one of these things. I'm not very certain. At that moment, a want quietly becomes a need. Screens, enrichment classes, entertainment. These things slowly shift categories without us realizing it. And I am not saying parents are weak. Hey, we are exhausted. But when we treat convenience as necessity, children learn a very dangerous lesson that emotions and discomfort automatically justify spending. And that's how the line between wants and needs start to blur. So, how do I explain wants versus needs to my own children? I don't explain it as right or wrong. I explain it as order. I ask one very simple question. If you don't have this, will we suffer a very terrible consequence? And if they don't get that, I'll make it even much, much, much clearer for them. I would simplify the consequence. If I don't have it, would it lead to serious harm? Would I get hurt? Could I possibly die from it? If it is true, then it is a need. So, what are these things? Examples are food is a need, water is a need. In today's society, housing is also a need because it protects us from danger. Now, compare that with wants. Wants make us feel very happy. They make life very enjoyable. And we will survive without them. So these are wants, and that distinction matters. A want is not wrong. A want is just a lower priority. So once children understand this hierarchy, decision making becomes much, much easier. The hardest part for parents isn't logic, it's emotions. Because emotional wants feel urgent. When a child is overwhelmed, reasoning doesn't work immediately. So my very first priority is never explanation, it's calming. Now, I gotta take this with a pinch of salt. It doesn't mean I do not lose my cool. There have been times when my child is just a little bit overbearing and I do lose my temper as well. Sometimes that could also mean, and I've done this before, distracting them with something else. Of course, the younger they are, the easier it gets to distract, and the older they are, it is not so easy to distract them. So it is not to trick them, but it is to allow the emotions to settle. And once they are calm, that is when you can begin to explain. That is when you can begin to rationalize. And that is when true learning actually begins. I'll say something like, hey, earlier, it felt like you really needed that toy. It felt like you really needed that soft drink. It felt like you really needed that particular book. But after you calm down, you were actually okay with it and okay not with having that item, but you were actually okay without having that item. And then I asked the key question. So was it a need or was it a want but it felt urgent? This distinction helps children realize something very, very powerful and important. Feelings are powerful, but they are temporary. And that is the key lesson you want our children to take over. One thing I consciously avoid is to say no immediately. An instant no shuts down thinking. Instead, I ask questions. For example, I ask when one of my sons asks for a toy, which happens, I'll ask, why do you need this? Then I dig deeper. What does this toy help you with? And I wait until they answer. Don't you already have something that is quite similar to that? Don't you already have a lot of toys? And from time to time, I do make them go through spring cleaning. I'll bring out all of the toys, and they will realize that the toys are really spread out across a large space in the house. And they begin to wonder and realize, wow, I really do have a lot. This entire process is not to shame them, it is about helping them think. And if the answer doesn't make sense, I'll then say, hmm, that answer doesn't quite add up. You might want to think about it again. Over time, and this doesn't happen immediately, this happens over time. I realized that something interesting did happen. Before asking, my child already had answers prepared in his head. Before I could even ask, why do you need this? They gave an answer already. That tells me he was no longer reacting emotionally. He was really beginning to reason. And of course, if he gives a good answer, I will be more than happy, provided I can afford it, to go and give it to him. There is one phrase I personally hold very closely, and it's this: values are not taught, they are caught. And parents, yourselves and myself, we are the most influential influencers in our children's lives. So if we talk about restraint, but we ourselves happen to spend impulsively, our children will not only spot that, but they will also sound out and they would also realize, they would even highlight to us and you and me that there is a double standard, often immediately or maybe in their own actions. So at home, my wife and I, we speak openly about the purchases that we make. And we do this sometimes without even thinking because it is already a family culture. And we speak out, and whenever we disagree, we do disagree it about that purchase. And if we do agree, we would make the decision together. So ultimately, we rationalize the purchases openly and we do it in front of our children. We show them that there is actually a categorization in our heads already between what exactly is a want and what exactly is a need. Now, obviously, because we are already earning money, our ability to spend will, of course, make a little bit more sense in the long run. They also see that spending decision as thoughtful. They don't see that as an emotional purchase. It is collective, agreed between two parents, and it is not impulsive. That particular modeling happens to be way more impactful compared to the lectures that we can give our children. So when children aren't taught the difference between wants and needs earlier in life, everything feels rather urgent. And that is how lifestyle inflation takes place. That is how peer pressure becomes quite dangerous because that's when they allow their friends to impact them, to influence them emotionally. Even adults who were young before, and when they happen to earn a lot more money than the past, they could actually struggle. And it's not because they lack income, but it could be because they do lack judgment. So here's the simple reframe: a need is something you must have to survive, a want is something you can live without, even though it feels pretty important. And if parents want to start somewhere this week, you might want to start with this particular thing that my wife and I do pretty often, not all the time, to be very truthful with you, but we do this often enough. And that is, we actually talk to one another in front of our children about certain purchases. Our children are well aware of why we make those purchases most of the time, and we rationalize it to each other. We talk about it to one another. We seek the understanding and the approval of it with one another. And if we disagree respectfully. So when children hear this calm, reasoned conversations about money. They learn how to think and not just how to ask. I really hope this has been very helpful to you. And if you feel that this content actually resonates with you and you do like what I've been sharing and you want to learn more as I begin to share over the week, I am posting here weekly on things that I have experienced in my life and how I go about it, even the scripts that I use. I can even help you out with that. So if you like my channel so far, please click a like to this video. It really helps with the YouTube algorithm. And if you like what I have so far as well, please subscribe so that you will know once something comes on. Take care. Peace.